Oh, tiptoe through the window, by the window, that is where I'll be. Come tiptoe through the tulips with me.
Ever notice how some songs just kind of worm their way into, well, everything?
Like they become part of the background music of life itself.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today.
Sounds intriguing. What's the musical mystery of this time?
You sent in that blog post about Tiny Tim, right? The one about Tiptoe Through the Tulips.
Oh, yeah. That one's a wild ride, let me tell you.
I'll say, I thought I knew that song, but the places it goes, the connections, it's mind-blowing.
It really is. It's like this little tune is a secret doorway to like a whole century of music and culture.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't had the pleasure of hearing Tiptoe Through the Tulips,
You mean they haven't lived? Just kidding, but seriously.
humor us. Where does
Uh-huh.
this earworm even come from?
Well, buckle up because we're going all the way back to 1929.
1929. The Roaring Twenties. Flappers. Jazz.
And Tiptoe Through the Tulips hitting #1 on the charts.
Wait, seriously? #1.
Yep. And it stayed there for 10 weeks, can you imagine?
10 weeks at #1. This isn't like today's charts where a song's lucky to last 10 minutes.
Right. Different times. Back then, if a tune was a hit, everyone and their brother wanted a piece of it.
So who was this original Tiptoe trailblazer?
That would be Nick Lucas, the crooning troubadour, as he was known.
Crooning troubadour. Love it. What's that even mean, though?
He had this smooth, intimate style of singing that was huge E back then. Think Bing Crosby, but even earlier.
Okay, so we've got a hit song, a charismatic singer. What happens next in the Tiptoe timeline?
Well, hold on to your hats, because in 1930, Tiptoe Through the Tulips makes a giant leap into the world of cartoons.
Cartoons, get out of here.
No, seriously. It was featured in one of the very first Looney Tunes cartoons ever made.
Wow. You're telling me Tiptoe Through the Tulips is right there at the dawn of cartoon history.
Yep. Talk about unexpected connections, right?
That's an image I'm not going to forget. So, from jazz age chart topper to a cartoon theme song, this tune's already had quite the life.
And we're just getting started. Wait till we get to the 60s, and a little fella named Tiny Tim steps onto the scene.
Okay, so speaking of Tiny Tim, he's, well, how do I put this? He's an icon, but he's unique.
That's one way to put it. But under that, shall we say, memorable persona was a guy with a deep love for a very specific kind of music.
You mean beyond the ukulele and the whole falsetto thing? That wasn't just an act.
Oh, he was totally committed to that style, but it came from a real place. See, his dad had this collection of old 78 RPM records.
78. Those things are ancient. I think I saw one in a museum once.
Exactly. But young Herbert Carey, that was Tiny Tim's real name, he grew up listening to these relics.
Wait, so he was immersed in the sounds of, like, the early 1900s, like way before rock and roll.
Exactly. We're talking early jazz, vaudeville tunes, stuff most kids wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole.
Wow, that's wild. So this wasn't just some image he put on for show. It was, like, ingrained in him from childhood.
Exactly. He even said that discovering his falsetto voice was like a religious experience while he was listening to the radio. Imagine that.
Talk about a musical epiphany.
Yeah.
So he's practically a time traveler, musically speaking, bringing the past back to life.
You got it. In fact, a young Roger Ebert, yes, that Roger Ebert saw Tiny Tim perform in Greenwich Village way back in the day.
No way. Ebert was into Tiny Tim.
Oh.
Okay, now I have to hear this story.
Well, picture this. A young Ebert, just starting out, ends up at this club called the Black Pussycat.
The Black Pussycat. I love the name already.
And there, on stage, is Tiny Tim. Ebert actually wrote later that he and his buddies found ourselves being entertained by a man the likes of whom we'd not seen before.
I bet. And this was Greenwich Village in the 60s. Talk about a time and place known for pushing boundaries.
Exactly. But even in that scene, Tiny Tim managed to stand out.
So he's got this unique style rooted in the past, but he's also performing in a place known for being open to, well, everything.
Right. And this is where things get really interesting. Because it turns out those early performances, a lot of them were in LGBTQ plus clubs.
You're kidding, seriously.
Seriously. And remember, this is the 60s, long before mainstream acceptance of the LGBTQ plus community.
That's amazing. So he's challenging norms in one way, but also, musically speaking, he's bridging worlds.
Exactly. And it gets even wilder. Are you ready for this?
Hit me with it. At this point, I'll believe anything.
He ends up recording with the band.
Wait, the band, as in the Wait Up on Cripple Creek, that band.
One and the same. Talk about a musical collision, right?
Okay, you've got to explain this one. How does Tiny Tim end up working with the band? They seem like total opposites.
It's a long story, but basically they crossed paths while Tiny Tim was working on this movie, You Are What You Eat.
You Are What You Eat. What kind of movie is that?
It's a trip, let's just say. But the point is, Tiny Tim ends up covering I Got You, Babe, and Be My Baby with the band backing him up.
Stop it. I Got You, Babe. As in Sonny and Cher.
The one and only. You can actually find it on a deluxe edition of the band's Basement Tapes album.
I am floored. Tiny Tim singing Sonny and Cher, backed by the band. See, this is why I love this show.
Right. You think you've got someone figured out, and bam, there's a whole other side to them.
It just goes to show there was a lot more to this guy than met the eye. Speaking of surprises, you mentioned earlier that he got married on The Tonight Show.
Oh, yeah. 1969, Tiny Tim ties the knot in front of millions of viewers. Talk about a media sensation. But that's a story for another time, maybe.
Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity. We're going to revisit that one. But before we move on, you mentioned another passion of his. Something even more unexpected than the early music or the band.
You bet. Ready for this. Tiny Tim was a huge hockey fan.
Hockey. You're putting me on. Ukulele playing, falsetto singing, time-traveling Tiny Tim was into hockey.
He was a massive Toronto Maple Leafs fan, in fact.
Toronto Maple Leafs, huh?
Yeah.
Not exactly the first team that comes to mind.
Right. You'd think maybe a more, shall we say, niche sport would have suited him better. But nope, he loved the Leafs.
So is this like a casual fan thing, or are we talking die-hard, painted-face super fan here?
Oh, he was all in. There are photos of him on the ice with the team back in '69, wearing Pat Quinn's jersey, no less.
He actually got on the ice. You're kidding. I can't even picture it.
Well, let's just say he needed a little help from a couple of players to stay upright. Jim McKenney and Mike Walton, I think it was.
Wait, they had to prop him up. I knew he wasn't exactly known for his athletic prowess, but still.
Hey, in his defense, he did say afterwards that being on the ice was a thrill, but that he was always athletic spiritually, not physically.
Spiritually, not physically. Classic Tiny Tim. You gotta love the guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this multifaceted guy, deep musical roots, hanging out with hockey stars, and then there's that whole Tonight Show wedding.
Ah, yes, the wedding. That was something else. 1969, Tiny Tim marries Miss Vicky live on national television.
Over 40 million people tuned in to watch. Can you imagine the buzz?
It was a massive pop culture moment. The ukulele player with the falsetto voice, finding love in the spotlight. People ate it up.
It's like something out of a movie, except it actually happened.
It does make you wonder, though, if all that attention, all those expectations, if it was too much.
Because the fairy tale didn't exactly have a fairy tale ending, did it?
Sadly, no. They divorced after 3 years. And Tiny Tim's career, it had its ups and downs, to say the least.
And then there were the health problems.
Yeah, his health declined in later years. And tragically, in 1996,
This is the part I'm dreading.
he was performing at a benefit concert. And while he was on stage,
While he was singing Tiptoe Through the Tulips.
yes, he collapsed.
Oh, no.
He died shortly after.
That's awful. And kind of eerie, too. I mean, to die singing the song that made him famous. There's a whole other layer of complexity to it, isn't there?
It does make you think, was he a carefully crafted persona, a genuine artist, or maybe both at the same time?
It's probably a question without an easy answer.
Probably not. But that's part of what makes his story so interesting so many years later. We're still talking about him, still fascinated by the contradictions.
And still listening to Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Who knew a song about flowers could take us to such unexpected places?
Right. From the jazz age, to cartoons, to counterculture, to dot hockey, it just goes to show you never know where a song will lead you. Or what other stories are hiding in plain sight.
Speaking of stories hiding in plain sight, earlier you mentioned something about Tiny Tim's marriage that caught my attention. You said it's a story for another time, but do we have time for it now?
You bet. What are you most curious about?
You know, it's kind of wild when you think about it. Tiny Tim's life was this wild, unpredictable ride, right? And Tiptoe Through the Tulips, it's like the song followed a similar path.
Totally. I mean, who'd have thought a tune from 1929 would end up as like the soundtrack to so many different things? Jazz, cartoons, counterculture, even hockey. It shows how a song can take on a life of its own.
It's almost like Tiptoe Through the Tulips was this blank canvas. Each artist who came along, they each got to paint their own version on it. From Nick Lucas to the Humane Society, and then Tiny Tim, of course.
I like that, the blank canvas idea, because the song itself is pretty simple, right? But all these different artists, they brought their own style, their own experiences to it, and suddenly It's something totally new.
And that's what makes it so cool. It's familiar, but it can still surprise you. You can hum along to it, but it also makes you think about like how art changes over time.
And how our own tastes change. What we connect with, it's different for everyone, and it shifts as we experience more of, well, life.
And that's got to be one of the biggest takeaways from today, right?
Yeah.
Even things we think we know, like a song we've heard a million times, they can still have surprises in store. There's always more to the story if we just look a little closer.
Exactly. It's like a reminder to never stop being curious. There are hidden connections and weird stories tucked away everywhere. You just got to be open to finding them. Who knew we'd uncover so much just by following the trail of Tiptoe Through the Tulips?
And who knows what other hidden gems are out there, right? Songs, stories, maybe even objects, all with their own secret histories waiting to be discovered. That's what makes this whole thing so exciting. There's always something new to find if you just know where to look.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder this. What seemingly simple things in your own life might have deeper meaning or unexpected connections if you just take a moment to listen a little closer. Until next time.
Shades of night are creeping, willow trees are weeping, old folks and babies are sleeping. Silver stars are gleaming, all alone I'm scheming, scheming to get you out here, my dear. Come, tiptoe to the window, by the window, that is where I'll be. Come, tiptoe through the tulips with me. Tiptoe from your pillow to the shadow of a willow tree, and tiptoe through the tulips with me. Knee deep in flowers we'll stray, we'll keep the showers away, and if I kiss you in the garden, in the moonlight, will you pardon me? Come tiptoe through the tulips with me.